The rivalry is back. Can the Minnesota Gophers bring the axe back to Dinkytown after faltering in 2023? It's time to turn our eyes towards Madison in 2024.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Today, we are finishing up our Behind Enemy Lines series. We are covering our final Gophers opponent on the season in the Wisconsin Badgers. If you haven't been following along, we've been breaking down every single Gophers opponent, the coaching changes, the personnel changes, transfers, and the make or break strengths, weaknesses, and what have you of every single Gophers opponent so far for the upcoming season. And this is our final one. This is our final game, week 13. So we're going to be breaking down the Wisconsin Badgers, what has changed since last year, who are some key pieces back, strengths, weaknesses, and the make or break for the Gophers to get the axe back to Minnesota. We're also going to talk about today 5 games on the season that I need as wins the most for my soul, just the games that have a little special extra something that I need the game this year. You need the dub, you need the win, you need it just to make sure you feel a little better after this season. So we're going to break down those 5 games to kick off today and then move on to our Wisconsin Badgers opponent and breaking them down. So be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube. Be sure to follow along wherever you get your podcast at Locked On Golden Gophers. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast so others can find the show as well. I appreciate y'all for listening and tapping in each and every day. Now moving beyond the Behind the Enemy Line series, starting tomorrow and moving forward, we're going to be breaking down the Gophers internally, what their position groups each and every day. We're going to break down the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, edge room, O-line, interior defensive line, defensive or edge rushers, linebackers, you name it. We're going to be breaking down every single group, what we think the depth chart looks like, who could be some potential big players in the makings, breakout years maybe. And then on top of that, ranking each position group across the entire Big Ten each and every day for the next week or two. So you're definitely going to want to hit subscribe if you want to learn a bit more about your current Gophers team and how things could shake out heading into the season. Now, first, like I said, let's talk about those top 5 Minnesota wins that I need for my soul. I don't know if these are in the same order as you, but I saw a comment on YouTube the other day and it got me thinking. So I'm breaking down the top 5 games that I just need Minnesota to win this upcoming season and why it's a top 5 game for me personally, not because of the standings, not because of the record, not because trying to get a bowl game, but just for your soul to feel a little bit better about the Gophers. If everything went wrong, at least you had these wins in this order. Now, honorable mention is Rutgers. I definitely have them up towards the top 5, but I couldn't get them in this list. Now, these other 5 are just a little bit more important to me. So kicking it off with game number 5, the 5th most important game for me in this upcoming season is the game against the Illinois Fighting Illini, against Brett Bielema, on the road at Illinois, and it's just a team that Minnesota has not beaten since Brett Bielema has been the head coach. He's a little full of himself at times. He definitely uses these type of talks and I guess sticks his nose up a little bit, that the fact that Minnesota can't beat him, and that is used on the recruiting trail. That is used in competitive situations where recruits are considering both schools, and enough is enough. This Illinois team, this Illinois program isn't an elite program, isn't a top-notch program. They're in the middle of the Big Ten and maybe should be lower than Minnesota, but Minnesota just hasn't been able to find a way to get over the hump, and enough is enough. For your soul, for my soul, for the Coach PJ Flex soul. They need to exercise that demon, and they need to find a way to win against Illinois. Winning that game is going to be pertinent because it'll help them in the long run, because they're probably going to be favored in that game. But at the same time, because of how last year finished, 2 minutes or less left in the game, the Gophers are up, it's 4th and long, and somehow, some way, with a backup quarterback with their starter leaving the field injured, Illinois finds a way to drive the entire field, score the ball, and really put a gut punch to the stomach of all Gophers fans, players, coaches, and what have you to end that game. Minnesota couldn't come back. They couldn't get the ball passing down the field to get back into range to take the lead back. No, it was a loss after you finally think they're getting over that little hump. It needs to happen this year, but that's my fifth most important game. So what's my fourth? My fourth is the USC Trojans. This one's a little more personal for me just because I feel like USC Trojan fans, ever since coming to the Big Ten, if you go onto any Big Ten post, if you go onto any random, like talking about the Big Ten as a conference, if you go into anything not even remotely related to USC, but more so just the Big Ten, you will find USC fans chirping in the comments, talking about how they're going to dominate, talking about how this is going to be their conference, and just overly confident for a team that really hasn't done that much in the last decade of football. But they're living off of their past glory. They're living off of their past name and their past winning. Now, Lincoln Riley is there. I get that. He's a great coach. He has great success with quarterbacks. But at the same time, they just had one of the worst defenses in the entire country last season. Now, can that bounce back with a new defense coordinator? Yes, we broke that down in their episode of Behind the Enemy Lines. But the fan base for the USC Trojans has become one of the most annoying fan bases in my eyes. Almost more annoying than Nebraska, not quite as not quite as annoying as the Wisconsin Badgers, not quite as annoying as the Iowa Hawkeyes and their true rivalries. But I feel like Hawkeyes fans, Badgers fans, and what have you, they still like, yeah, you'll chirp at your rivals, but it's not like a endless nonsensical chirping of how you're going to be the greatest and dominate and all these things in comments on the Big Ten. This USC team acts like, or fan base acts like they could run through Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, you name it. It doesn't matter where USC fight on. No. That's ridiculous. And then you add in the little flip of transfers of commits, not transfers, but of recruiting commits in Jide Abasiri. And I think that that'll add a little bit of extra motivation for this Gophers staff overall. But I think that you add that factor in plus the annoying fan base, and I would love for Minnesota to beat USC. And that's my fourth most important game for my soul. Now, the third most important game is the North Carolina game. One, because you need to redeem yourself after last year, after the ugly game that it became, after the missed explosive plays, after giving up every explosive play and some to North Carolina, after letting Drake May tear you apart and pick you apart and throw for over 400 passing yards on you. Minnesota's got to bounce back. They got to find a way to exercise that demon, to get back on the right track, get back on the right foot. And this kicks off the entire season. So winning this game and winning it big could set a huge foundation for the Gophers. It could set a huge tone for the Gophers that this is not the same team as last year. This is not the same attitude as last year. This is not the same passiveness as last year. This Gophers team is going to be for real and lay it on and step on the gas and really get after it. If Minnesota can go out there in week one in a Thursday nighttime primetime game and really lay it on North Carolina at home, it could wake the world up. It could wake the Big Ten up. It could really wake the Gophers up to their potential and their success for this season. And I think it could get this fan base the energy that it needs after a down year from last year. So this North Carolina game comes in at number 3, but I find it hard not to have your top rivals as your top 2. So who made the first and who made the second for me? I think the top 2 game for my soul this year is Wisconsin. Now, most people would probably have this one as number 1, especially after losing the Axe last year and winning Floyd last year and what have you. And I would agree. I wouldn't argue. I think there's a case for both of these games. You definitely want to get the Axe back. You definitely want to get a win against Luke Fickell and crew, because otherwise Badger fans are probably going to be talking about how Fickell owns you, or they're going to be talking about how this new era PJ Fleck's never going to get a win again. You'll hear those type of things if they win back-to-back with Coach Fickell. But if it goes back to Minnesota, then you can see this rivalry renewed. You can see the energy of this rivalry take form a little bit more as it continues to be more of a 500 split between the two teams in a real rivalry of sorts. So yes, I would love to see Minnesota win against Wisconsin. There are reasons why you could have this one as number 1, but number 1 for me is against the Iowa Hawkeyes in week 4 of the season, because of many reasons. Because of where it's positioned, it could be a huge momentum swing for Minnesota. It could be a huge boost in confidence heading to Michigan the next week and then back at home for that USC game after that. It could be all of that. But also, you've had one heck of a time against Iowa in the PJ Fleck era. It has been a struggle. You finally get your first win last season, and all of a sudden, things change. Things change, but they change because your team believes in itself and has more confidence in that department. You got the monkey off your back, but at the same time, you want to put any hesitancy, any controversy, or anything like that to rest. Put it to bed, because last year people talk about that punt return that could have been a touchdown, but then it was an illegal fair catch motion and all of that and what have you. And there's a debate back and forth, and people saying this and that and controversy and what have you. Put it to bed. Go out there, beat Iowa, make sure they know that it was legit, and it doesn't matter if it was last year or this year. We're still back. We're better than ever, and we're going to get this dub. If you can do that, I think it'll send a message not only to your rival and hush up all the annoying noise, but if you drop that game, the noise is going to be completely nagging. People are going to be nitpicking. People are going to be talking about the only way Minnesota could win against Iowa is on BS from a referee and all this stuff. But if you go out there and put it to bed and you go out there and win that game, the notion will die. The talk about, oh, it shouldn't have counted, blah, blah, that will go away because you'll have proven yourself in back-to-back years and put that rumor, that controversy and whatnot to bed. So overall, Iowa game is the number one game for me, for my soul, in 2024. If you have different ones, let me know in the comments below, but we're going to move on to breaking down the Wisconsin Badgers. That's what's coming up next. Coaching changes, impact transfers, and what have you. We're breaking it all down with the Badgers coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime, because Gametime has killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. So Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And it's not just tickets for sporting events. It's for comedy. It's for theater. It's for concerts and what have you. You have all of these different options to choose from. And Gametime is also an authorized ticket marketplace for the Major League of Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And on top of that, prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to the first pitch. So you're definitely going to want to give them a try, because they have killer last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and etc. And on top of that, they've got zone deals, so you can save even more depending on which section you choose. They have the all-in pricing feature that you have to toggle, and once you toggle that feature, you don't have to worry about hidden fees. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff, because it'll show the price all up front. And my favorite thing is their Gametime ticket coverage. You have your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So if you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, head on over to Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, download the Gametime app, make an account, and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDON college for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, we're catching up with the changes of the Wisconsin Badgers. Now let's talk about the coaching first. We've got Luke Fickell back in year 2 with Wisconsin. Now he had 6 years at Cincinnati prior, where they went to a CFP, the only G5 team to do that. And that's going to be hyped up for the rest of time now, because they were the only G5 team to make it to a playoff with only 4 teams. And that will live in infamy. But last year, I was adamant that I liked Luke Fickell, which I hate to admit, but I thought it was a great hire. But I also was adamant that the 8+ wins that I was seeing as easy money from Badger fans and different media analysts alike, and all the hyperbole on top of that of many people saying, oh, this is going to be a 10-win, double-digit win season, easy. They're going to win the West like it's nobody's business. I said all of that was extremely unrealistic. I said, there's a lot of big changes happening on the offensive coordinator in the system. There's a lot of system changes on the defense, and there's a big jump from the G5 back to the Power 5 conferences that it's just hard to hit that level of success in year 1. And people were like, it doesn't matter, he'll make it happen. He won he got to the college football playoff, blah blah blah. Well, I'm happy to pat myself on the back, knowing that that was unrealistic, ended up being unrealistic. That being said, I do believe year 2 could be a leap year for the Badgers and Luke Fickell heading into this 2024 season. I think they could have an improved year. I think as he gets going, more things will develop and it will start to look cleaner and the mistakes will start to clean up. And that's when this Badgers team can start to get dangerous. I think some of the transfers they brought in have high impact upside. And so overall, I think this is going to be a good year for him. Now, Mike Tressel on the defense, he had some adjustments last year on the defensive end. Now, he's found success in his past with defenses, but last year it wasn't as great as what we're used to seeing the Badgers when it comes to being a defensive team. We'll break down the numbers of how they went in all of those major statistical categories across rush defense, pass defense, total defense, scoring defense, and turnovers gained. We'll talk about all that in a moment, but they were above average, but not quite the great Wisconsin defense we're used to seeing. Now, that could switch this year with another year in the system with more impact players that are maybe meant for this system coming in, but I still need to see more from Mike Tressel before I can be impressed. Now, on the flip side, on the offensive side of things, Phil Longo coming into year 2, everyone and their mother was talking about how this Wisconsin team was going to be looking to run an air raid offense, and people were wondering, would they abandon the run? Well, it looked a little bit more similar to what we're seeing from the old Wisconsin teams as far as the running game was still a high priority. They're using the ground and pound game a lot especially in the early stages of the year. But that being said, when you look at the actual numbers of it all, Wisconsin did see more pass attempts and more completions in this new system than they've ever seen in program history. Now, on top of that, they had 2,862 pass yards, which is good for 4th best in the entire program history. So they did find more success in the passing game, even if it didn't feel like this high-powered dairy raid offense that people were bringing up. But that, again, could come along in year 2, and we're going to see. Especially the big question for me is the new quarterback at the helm, and will he be more of a fit for that system? Will they start to lean into it more if they feel more comfortable with the quarterback fit? I think the quarterback is very, very important in this type of system, so we'll see if Tyler Van Dyke is the guy to make it happen. So speaking of Tyler Van Dyke, we're talking about impact transfers now. Wisconsin had 16 total transfers from the transfer portal this offseason. I am going to go over a few of those that I believe will be impact players for the Badgers in this upcoming season. The first being Tyler Van Dyke from Miami, quarterback. You've also got Tackett Curtis, a linebacker from USC. You've got John Plus, a linebacker from William & Mary. And you might be like, whoa, William & Mary, why does that even matter? Let me break you down his numbers to you in a little bit when we talk about the defensive side of the ball, and you'll see exactly why. His name's not John Plus, it's John Pius. Let me get that right the first time. But John Pius is a player that you should not overlook whatsoever. Then you've got Leon Lowery from Syracuse. You've got Tyrell Henry, a wide receiver from Michigan State. Tawi Walker, a running back from Oklahoma. And Jackson McGohan, of tight end from LSU. So they've got some big power conference type players coming from the transfer portal that could make big impacts. The quarterback, like I said, quarterback room, Tyler Van Dyke was officially named the quarterback one earlier today. So that debate is no longer anything. His main issue from last season was needing to cut down on the turnovers, where he had 12 in his first year as the starting quarterback at Miami. That's where you saw a lot of high potential, high upside from him. He threw 2,931 yards, 25 touchdowns to 6 interceptions on 63 completion percent. But you look at last year, his numbers got close to that, but the turnovers were what were costly to him. If he can improve on those numbers that he had in year 1, then Wisconsin can be a dangerous team in 2024. They also have depth behind him with Braden Locke. They've also, he held it together last year when Tanner Mordecai got injured. They also have Mabry Metoyer, who is a quarterback in the class of 2024 that committed to them. High upside guy, taller guy, skinnier frame, kind of looks like Trevor Lawrence, but overall he could be a high upside guy for them in the future. So the quarterback room is pretty strong. You go to the running back room, they definitely lost Braylon Allen, who has been the bread and butter for their run game for the past few years, but they do have Ches Malusi back, who was lost for most of the year last year after injury. Malusi had 307 yards and 4 touchdowns in 4 games last year, so he got off to a hot start, almost 100 yards a game. I guess it was 75 yards a game or something like that. But he had a touchdown a game. So overall, he will be looking to start hot again. And then there's the transfer addition in Oklahoma's Tawi Walker, who has some nice upside now. Tawi Walker had 513 yards and 7 touchdowns in a split backfield last year. So he can hold his own in a split backfield. But if he's able to get that main job, he could really maybe pop off the page when it comes to production and numbers. And then you've got this recruiting class they have coming in where they have 3 running back additions as well, including a top 10 rated running back recruit in Dylan Jones. So this room has been the bread and butter for Wisconsin over the years, and it likely will continue to move that forward that way in this upcoming season. Now, the wide receiver room is the room that I still have the most questions about. I think it's the most interesting. It'll be make or break for this offense, but they found a great addition in Will Pauling. He was 3rd or 4th in the entire Big Ten in receiving yards. I know he passed Daniel Jackson by like 7 yards by the end of the season with the bowl game because he had 143 in the bowl game, and the Gophers couldn't even pass the ball in their bowl game with the only quarterback they had on roster who could not throw the ball to save his life. So that was an asterisk in my mind when it came to him having a more productive receiving season than Daniel Jackson. But overall, he was a top 3-4 guy in that category, so you can't be mad at it. You know, they also had Bryson Green, who held his own coming from Oklahoma State to Wisconsin. But CJ Williams, I heard all offseason about CJ Williams, and he's the next big thing, and he's a stud in the making. He's coming from USC. He was a 4-star guy, blah, blah, blah. Look, CJ Williams, I said back then, was massively overhyped, and he did not do anything to prove that wrong. Now, does he pan out this upcoming year, or does he end up having more success? Now, they also have 2 more transfers coming in from power conference schools, Tyrell Henry, a speedster from Michigan State, and then they also have Joseph Griffin of Boston College. And then you've got a young guy, true freshman coming in, Kyan Barry Johnson. He has a ton of high upside for a freshman coming in, but we'll see if he gets any opportunity. And then Tretch Kekahuna, he was from last year's class. He was almost on the verge of a 4-star guy. So there's a lot of names that could excite from this wide receiver room. But the only thing that's proven and given is Will Pauling and his over 800 yards last year. Can anybody else answer the bell for sure? That's going to be a big question. Tight end room, Tucker Ashcraft will likely lead the room once again, but the receiving production for the tight ends was not what we're used to seeing. It dwindled last year, 8 receptions for 86 yards for Ashcraft. I would anticipate more wide receiver usage in the pass game once again. And then looking at the offensive line, it should be a positive for Wisconsin with a lot of experience, 3+ players and starters coming back. Jack Nelson, who was an above average graded player, Joe Huber, who was an above average graded player, and then Riley Malman, above average graded player on PFF, all of them being starters from last year. Then you've got Joe Brunner, who had an average grade last year, but he had limited time on the field as a redshirt freshman. He could be the starter at the left guard position. And Jake Renfro, transferring in from Cincinnati, I believe a year ago. He didn't get to play very much except for the bowl game where he held his own, but he started all the year in 2021. So he has starter experience. So they have a very experienced offensive line that could be one of the best in the Big Ten. You flip it to the defense, and last year Wisconsin was 38th in total defense, 39th in pass defense, 39th in rush defense, 20th in scoring defense, and 69th in the nation in turnovers gained. So I would say this defensive unit was slightly above average, but but over the years, what we've seen from Wisconsin is usually top 20 numbers. It's usually high flying, high impact defense, big hitting linebackers and what have you. And I just didn't see Wisconsin as the defensive beast that we're used to seeing. That was not the case last season. They were consistently around the top 40 defense, around 38th across the board. So if they improve on that, then maybe we can see something to be excited about. They have some key defensive players back from last season, like Hunter Wohler. Dude's a stud, 120 tackles, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. You've also got Ricardo Hallman, 34 tackles, 7 interceptions, 5 pass breakups. I can't remember if it's Cheney or Shanae, 80 tackles, 3 sacks last year. And then Darrell Peterson, 47 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and 2 pass breakups. But the transfers, a couple of those guys transferring in have some impressive stats from their old teams. Tackett Curtis, 40 tackles, 1 pass breakup, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Leon Lowry, 46 tackles, 1 pass breakup, and 3.5 sacks. But John Pius, who I had mentioned earlier in this show from William & Mary, Over the course of the last 2 seasons at William & Mary, this man has 110 tackles, 18 and a half sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 3 pass breakups. So he has high upside. He could be a massive player for the Badgers moving forward. And then you look at the class of 2024, it has 22 commits with 8 4-stars, offensive linemen, defensive lineman, running back, defensive lineman, offensive lineman, tight end, linebacker, and an edge rusher, all being their 4-star players coming in. So last season, this game was the Axe was tied at halftime, but the collapse in the third quarter from the Gophers had the Axe going back to Wisconsin. I think once again, it's going to be a grinding game. It could be a close game throughout most of it. And we're going to talk about the strengths, weaknesses, and make or break for that game coming up next. All right, Gophers fans, let's talk about the strengths of the Wisconsin Badgers team that we're going to be playing in Week 13 to wrap up the season. Now, first off, they have major pieces on the defense to improve that unit overall. Now, like I said, it was a top 40 unit, probably in the top 35, top 38 in the entire country. But you've got Waller back, you've got Hallman back, and then you've got some huge transfers that, if they pan out, could be difference makers. So I think this defense is going to be a big strength for theirs moving forward. Now, they also have one of the top wide receivers in the Big Ten from last year back in year 2 of the system. So his numbers could be even better. And then on top of that, a couple other strengths is the O-line should be consistent and a strength for this team. And their running back room has a ton of depth. 3 running backs that are quality guys in this upcoming class. And then they have a transfer coming in who has high upside and a guy who knows the system and has been doing it. So 5 running backs that you can feel really good about you've got with the Wisconsin Badgers. Now, on the flip side, the weaknesses to take a look at this year, the interior defensive line feels like it could be a weak spot compared to years where they've had a real stud in there like a Benton or things like that. The interior defensive line feels like it could cause some problems for the Badgers if they can't stop their run game with some presence in there. So that's a big question. Now, also, does Malusi and Tawi Walker have the upside to be an elite team on the ground as the Badgers have been for many, many years? Or are they just kind of a hold the fort down group? That's going to be the big question for me. It could be a weakness if they don't have that big upside to keep the clock grinding and what have you for this team. And then the final 2 other weaknesses that are potential weaknesses for me is Tyler Van Dyke's turnovers. Can he bounce back, or will he be more of a turnover machine that could make or break a lot of the season? And then finally, the depth at wide receiver. Is it sufficable beyond Will Pauling? That's a big question for me. Now, when you're looking at the make or breaks for this game in 2024, I think this game is one that Minnesota is going to need to be playing its best football in order to bounce back and win the Axe. Now, you're talking about coming off of a home game against Penn State. That probably won't be a pretty game for Minnesota. So can you end the year with a bang and beat your rival, or will it be back-to-back potential losses to close out the year, which doesn't help morale, doesn't help you for trying to get to a quality bowl game or anything like that? Can Minnesota get back on track if they drop the game to Penn State and win on the road against your rivals and get the Axe back to Minnesota? Overall, I think this is going to be one of the key games for Minnesota in their upside of the season. If they have a bad year, then this is probably one that doesn't look good for them. But if you go out and you win in North Carolina, you win versus Iowa, you win the games you're supposed to against a UCLA, a Maryland, a Illinois, and what have you, I think this could be a game that Minnesota's pushing for a 7th or 8th win on the season if everything is going right. But if this is a game where Minnesota only has 4 to 5 wins and you're looking to try and get into a bowl game, this could be critical against your rivals. Now, being a rivalry game, I always feel like those feel more 50-50 in most given years because you could be having a 1-win season and play your best game against a rival. So we'll see if Minnesota can go on the road. Now, I believe 2 of the last 3 times Minnesota has gone on the road to Wisconsin, they've walked away with a win. And the one that they didn't walk away with a win, it was an overtime loss. I think they lost by a field goal. So overall, going to Wisconsin has been more successful than not for Coach PJ Fleck in his time as the Gophers coach. We'll see if he can keep that streak going. But the 3 make or breaks for me in this game is the first one. Your defense need to be clicking on all levels in this matchup. Now, last year, the reason the Badgers really beat the Gophers at the end of this season was because they could not stop the run. Both Braylon Allen and Tanner Mordecai absolutely ran all over us, and that's what cut the Gophers deep in the third quarter, allowing the Badgers to pull forward, take the lead, a controlling lead, and really run the clock out for the rest of the game. You can't have that happen, but I think that this Badgers team is going to want to pass the ball a little bit more. I don't think the running backs, like I said, have as much upside as what we're used to seeing from this Badgers team. So you need to slow them down in the passing game and keep this game a close scoring game on all fronts, and hopefully keep that clock on your side, time of possession on your side. And that means slowing down their pass and keeping the ball in your hands to run the ball. Now, speaking of that, you're going to have to find a way to attack in the ground game, especially if that interior defensive line isn't as strong as what we think. If we think that it is kind of the weakness of this defense, you should be attacking it with inside zones, inside looks, dives, and what have you, with Darius Taylor, with C.A. Bangura, with Marcus Major, and really get after it on the ground game and make them prove that they can stop it, but then also keep the clock running in your favor. Now, the Gophers are going to be more of a dink and dunk passing team, and I think that the Badgers have what it takes to guard that type of passing offense with their key safeties, with a key cornerback and what have you. I think the Badgers are going to be more successful at stopping the pass than they are the run this season. So I would really lay the pressure on as far as running the ball goes. But the final make or break for this game will absolutely be turnovers. Whoever wins the turnover battle is probably going to win this game. And it's going to come down to the wire. It could be a close game all the way down. Even if you overlook Minnesota, I think that the rivalry games always show their best for both teams. So overall, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you for listening to the Behind the Enemy Lines segments this season as we get prepared for every single Gophers opponent. Now we're going to turn our eyes inward and break down the position groups day by day. Tomorrow we're talking quarterbacks. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Go Gophers, as always, and please don't forget to hit subscribe.